All right, everybody, here we go. So, we've been talking about helping people to somehow solve the problem of foreclosure, as that's a primary data pool or a potential client pool that we obviously have been niched with. And so last week we talked about three different strategies. We talked about a straight cash purchase and what's going on here. That's pretty self-explanatory. Then we talked about subject to taking over the mortgage of the seller and potentially catching up their arrears and buying the house that way. Which obviously there's different kind of exit strategies within that subject to. You could, Airbnbs, pad splits. You could wrap it on a mortgage. It's a little more risky. There's some ethical questions that come with that. Or you could just have it for a rental, depending on the numbers. And we just obviously need to know what the numbers look like when we underwrite the deal and make our offer to the seller. And then the third option, which we actually just successfully did, was a loan modification for a seller in foreclosure, in which we got the reinstatement fee tacked onto the back of the loan in a subordinate junior lien. And then they got a 3-month trial period in which their payments were modified. And this one was great because the modified payments were actually better than the payments that were previous by a couple $100 a month. So that this particular situation was great because it reduced the entry fee to literally just closing costs, pretty much just a couple grand, and then increased the cash flow potential on this by a couple $100 because of that, which makes this a really awesome opportunity. We got to help the seller stop the foreclosure, which is a really big deal for them. Their credit got salvaged. And we get to buy the house and get a really good deal on it. So there's one there. So the loan modification worked with the subject to together on that one. So let's talk about a fourth one, which would be a forbearance agreement. So the key here is a temporary hardship. And actually that last one we just had probably would have qualified for this, but because they didn't live in the house, there was a rental house for them. This wouldn't have worked for them. But let's say they did live in the house and they lost, and it's a two income family, and one of the incomes was lost for some reason that we don't know, and it created a financial hardship, i.e. a job loss. And so they fell behind on their payments, and for them, keeping food on the table was more important. What took precedence over paying the bills, paying the mortgage. That happens. So keeping the lights on and the food coming was the priority. These things happen. Lenders know this stuff. It's obviously not the ideal situation, but it happens. That being said, one thing we can do to help prospective clients, because obviously we genuinely want to help people. We don't want to just buy their house. That's the only solution. We want to be able to genuinely help them and provide value and really embody the core values of our company. And so that being said, we can help them negotiate a temporary forbearance. But a forbearance is not an absolving or a forgiveness of missed payments. The payments that get forborne ultimately do have to get recouped and repaid somehow. So one thing that the lender could potentially work with the borrower is a payment pause, which means they could take a hiatus in payments for a couple of months, maybe even a year, depending on the situation. Obviously, those there's still accruing interest, and it's still going to have to be paid back. It's just going to either be re-amortized over the rest of the loan, or it's going to be tacked on at the back of the loan, and the loan's going to get extended. The maturity date's going to get pushed back. Or a potential reduction in payments to the lender. So the monthly payment could actually go down some temporarily, depending on what the situation is, if the lender permits that, and we'll give the borrower some reprieve and some breathing room to be able to get stable, to get back on their feet, and to hopefully have the hardship resolved so that they don't have a foreclosure on their record. So we can obviously help the homeowner understand what forbearance is and what it is not. Okay. We can help and assist them in requesting it from their servicer, and we can also help them understand what the terms are before they sign anything. Because some lenders might want to lump some of that money and potentially could cause another issue down the road. So there is a forbearance right there. This probably won't be one that we deal with quite a bit, at least in our business, but it's still an option out there for borrowers. It just depends on the situation, and this is where it's going to come on to us doing a good job at talking to them, seeing what they have going on, and qualifying them for which route would be the best for them. A short sale. Now, a short sale does impact the credits, not nearly as bad as a foreclosure. And so this will happen when a homeowner owes too much to the lender than what the home is actually worth, and they cannot afford to stay. So sometimes we're going to have to call the lender, and there's obviously specifics and dynamics around this where the lender would agree to take we call it a short sale, but it's a lesser amount than what they're owed, because it's more it's more effective and efficient and less costly for them to actually follow through with the foreclosure. Now, the lender really is in for their money. They want their money. They owe people money. They have dividends they have to pay out, and they have investors that they've used their money to buy the note or service the note for. So that being said, they're all about their money, and it is what it is. That being said, it would be on us to look at the situation, to look at what they currently owe. Let's see what the house is worth and the condition that the house is in. We're going to have to look at like inventory on the market to see, how much inventory is on the market. What's the average days on market for these houses to be sold in the area? Once we can get a clearer picture of the market conditions and the conditions of the house and the actual borrower's conditions and what they owe, we can kind of figure out if a short sale would be a good opportunity. So in short, the lender does agree to accept less than the full payoff amounts, and will release the lien, allowing the property to be sold for less than what they owe. This does happen. It depends on how much of a discount the lender is going to need to take to make this work. But if the numbers work for them, they'll do it usually. The way that this works, so we have other brokering partners that really are awesome at doing short sales. So if we did have a short sale opportunity came our way, we would just refer it out for a fee and let them handle it. It's a lot of work to do a short sale, and although I'm a licensed agent, it's just a lot of time that if I would rather do other things that can generate more capital. So what is going to have to happen is they're going to have to get a third-party authorization signed, which is going to allow like the agent or the investor to talk with the lender. Okay. They're going to have to, one second. They're going to have to list the property on the MLS, and they're going to have to complete a short sale package to the lenders. Each lender has a loss mitigation department. They want to mitigate their losses. So they're going to have to provide a hardship letter, some financial statements, proof of income, tax returns, bank statements, all that stuff. And one of the things on our behalf is going to give a CMA, or in the brokerage world in real estate, for real estate agents, is a broker's price opinion, which is a CMA, just endorsed by a broker. And so just so they can get a gauge on what the house is worth in the market. And then if they get an offer, they're going to have to get a purchase agreement on it, and all the closing docs are going to be done just like a standard closing process. And then the lender will order an appraisal or their own BPO, and they'll either approve or counter the offer. And then if all goes well, then the transaction will close. So there's a lot going on here. So it helps the seller get out from under an upside down mortgage. like usually actually if a house goes to the foreclosure sale and it sells at the auction, and let's say for example when it goes to the auction, the borrower owes 200,000 and the house sells at the auction for 150,000. If that were to happen, the lender has the right, usually granted by the borrower in the closing documents, i.e. the deed of trust or the mortgage deed and the promissory note, that will permit, if the lender so choose, to file a judgment. It's called a deficiency judgment for the deficient balance that was not recovered at the foreclosure sale against the borrower, which is not good, and that could ultimately lead to garnished wages and a whole bunch of other bad stuff. So usually on a short sale, it's not going to be that drastic of a haircut for the lender, and they'll usually waive the deficiency balance, but this will need to get approved from the lender to the borrower for a CYA. It's far less damage to the credit than an actual foreclosure, and this may qualify, a borrower may qualify for the Mortgage Forgiveness Debt Relief Act tax exclusion, which obviously, like, we're not accountants, we don't claim to be accountants. They would need to talk with their tax preparer or their accountant as needed. So that's kind of the process there. It's good to know the process and how it works, but that would be the way that it goes. But we would end up referring that out, at least for the foreseeable future. Another thing that is better than a foreclosure, in the event that we are not able to help with a situation, just because of the numbers, because of the situation, or a short sale doesn't work, then the borrower, we can help them give essentially the house back, deed the house back to the lender with something called a deed in lieu of foreclosure. So it's like, hey, the borrower, they have no options, they don't know what to do. Rather than take it to the auction and actually suffer an actual foreclosure, which is arguably the worst thing that can happen to a person's credit profile in the United States, they would give the deed back to the lender for the lender to commence their process of selling the house and recouping their investment back. And so it saves the lender a lot of money, it saves them a lot of time, and it just allows them to get to work to start to get their investment back. So the homeowner voluntarily deeds the property back to the lender in exchange for being released from the mortgage obligation, and the lender will cancel the foreclosure. This is better than a foreclosure, but this still negatively does affect the credit. So we can help by negotiating with the lender to accept the deed in lieu directly to us, or a company we assign it to, essentially doing a deed in lieu into my hands rather than the bank's. Some lenders will agree to this if it speeds up their process. We'll see. So obviously the seller benefits by no foreclosure on their record. The lender will typically agree to waive the deficiency. Some lenders offer cash for keys and part of the deed in lieu. Sometimes the lender will just give them a couple $100 to leave, maybe $1,000, who knows? We'll see. And it's less damage on their credit than a foreclosure. But the lender will require that the title is clean and there's no other liens or encumbrances on the deed, and the house must be in good condition. Those are, and I don't blame them for that. They probably should want that. Pretty straightforward here. So that means if you have any subordinate liens, mechanics liens, judgment liens, whatever it is, that's all going to be taken care of before they take the house back via deed in lieu of foreclosure. Another strategy that we can do, or partner with somebody else that can do, is the purchasing of the notes. So if we remember, during some of our previous training, we noticed that regardless of the state you're in, a non-judicial state like Texas, okay, is going to secure their investment into an asset via a deed of trust. And the deed of trust secures the investment by the borrower pledging the collateral as something the lender can take if the borrower defaults. And the promissory note is what gives the authority of the lender or the trustee in a deed of trust state to initiate and prosecute the foreclosure process. Now, something that happens all the time, as we've noticed, let's use a typical situation. So we have the primary market for lenders, which is typically the person for your average home buyer, they're going to go to a lender like Rocket Mortgage, they're going to go to Veterans United, Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, your local bank or whatever, whoever does mortgage notes. Most of the time, not always, most of the time, you will work with in this case, in the primary market, when you're getting your loan, you will work with somebody called a loan officer or a loan originator, an LO. Typically they're called an RMLO, which means a residential mortgage loan officer. And you're going to give them your tax returns, bank statements, proof of employment, all that stuff. And they're going to basically look at you as a borrower to see how much of a risk you are to handle the payment. And if you're good to go, they close the loan on it. You buy the house. One of the main documents you're going to sign at your closing is called the deed of trust. If you're here in Texas or a state that doesn't go through the court system to foreclose it, or doesn't require a lawsuit to foreclose it, regardless, you're still going to sign a promissory note. And what happens on this is that the deed of trust often, or the promissory note, the notes. So when I say note, I mean promissory note, gets sold from the primary market lender, like your Rocket Mortgage. Sometimes they service it, but it usually gets sold to the secondary market, which is where we have the Fannie Mae, the Freddie Mac, and the regulations they put on lending. And so if it can be sold to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac in the secondary market, they have qualifying parameters and standards. So it's called a qualifying mortgage. This is going to be conventional, VA, FHA, USDA. Now, there are other kind of loans. Obviously, there's hard money loans. Those don't qualify. You have bank statement loans. Those are non-qualified loans, which means Fannie and Freddie standards don't apply to those. And those notes cannot be sold to the secondary market. Where in the secondary market, a lot of, kind of blue-collar investors that have 401ks and IRAs have a custodian managing their kind of their portfolio, their 401k, their pension plan, and it gets invested into a lot of it gets invested into mortgage-backed securities, which is what the disaster was in 2007 and 2008. A lot of subprime loans were defaulting like kind of all at once, and it collapsed everything. So that's why Dodd-Frank came. That's why the regulation was instituted under the Obama administration, to really tighten up lending standards so that stuff wouldn't happen again, because they really were writing loans that they should have never written. That being said, so the secondary market are the debt servicers that service the note, that collect the payments, that prosecute a foreclosure, that do all these things, that issue 1098-Ts for the borrowers for their interest and their taxes. They buy the notes because it's a good investment. And then the primary lender gets their money back so they can go and write more loans. So that's kind of how that works. And typically the primary lender makes money on origination points, all the fees that they get for writing the loan, and they also collect a lot of interest on the time that they service. They usually service it for 6 to 12 months, and if it's performing, then they sell it. Again, not every primary lender does this. So like I had a note with Freedom Mortgage for my own house. I had a VA loan on it, and they originated and they service it, right? My first house that I bought a VA loan on, I got the loan through Veterans United. It was a VA loan, and 12 months later, they sold my note to Freedom Mortgage, actually. And I just got a letter in the mail saying, hey, like we're going to pay these guys now. Pretty simple, no big deal. Nothing changes, and that's that. And so VU got their money back from Freedom so they could originate more loans. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles on this one. That being said, if we are capitalized and we have money, we can buy a non-performing note at a discount. And again, it's going to come down to what the numbers look like. There's going to be situations with the borrower. What are they trying to accomplish? What's going on with them? What's the house like? What's the condition of the house? What's the house worth? And so let's say everything is looking good. If I spend $150,000 to purchase a note that still has $2,000, 200 grand left on it, and the house is worth 250, I would buy that note at the discount, the 25% discount. I would do it if the lender would sell it to me, because I can just do a soft foreclosure and I can take the house back and I can go and resell it and make $100,000 on a $150,000 investment. This happens all the time, and I know people that do this. So there's that. There's a bunch of ways to do this. So leveraging our network of investors, we can, provided that the dynamics work, the numbers work, the collateral works, we can find somebody to buy the note, and that'll stop the foreclosure. And that will, and then the note purchaser can modify essentially the promissory note to more favorable terms. I mean, they can do whatever they want because now they own the note; they're the investor, and they can, and so we can do it that way. So they can continue to prosecute the foreclosure. They can do a loan modification, restabilize the note, and then go and sell the note. That's a way to do it too. There's a bunch of ways to do this, but that is one thing that they can do. And they can also receive a deed in lieu of foreclosure from the homeowner directly. Or they can sell it to another investor. This helps the seller because as the new lender, we can create a restructured payment they can afford. Okay, and our money's still going to be working for us at a good rate. We can forgive arrears, lower the rate, extend the term. We have full control if we own the note. We have full control. And so many homeowners are also relieved to deal with a human investor, not like a faceless servicer that they don't know, that doesn't want to know them either. So obviously this does require a little more experience from investors, and obviously we need to be capitalized. If we don't have the capital, then we can essentially sell that note, or it can make the connection and set up like some kind of a brokerage fee. Wrong word, not a brokerage fee, but like a referral fee. And usually most people will give you like a 1 or 2 points or 50% of the profit for giving them the deal, depending on the lender. And I'm going to end here with this last one called a wrap around mortgage. So this is assuming that somebody's behind on their payments and they're not going to stay in the house. It's not going to happen. So here's what I can do. If I have a property that's worth 250 grand, they owe 180 on their mortgage, and the rate is 4% on it. Let's say, actually, let me just look at it this way. Let me just use the example on here. So this is where I help the homeowner exit the house and create a seller financing for a buyer. So I'm going to basically buy, okay, here's the greatest thing, an unbuyable house and sell it to an unqualified buyer. Now, when I say unqualified buyer, remember what I just said. I was talking about Fannie and Freddie, the secondary market and the standards they put, where somebody might not have enough credit history, or somebody might not have qualifying income, or somebody might have something that doesn't qualify, but it doesn't mean they're not a responsible borrower. It doesn't mean they're not good for their money. So I, as the lender, have the privilege of granting or denying credit to anybody I want, right? Obviously, there's ethical parameters that I don't want to let somebody borrow money and charge them a monthly payment or a payment that they literally can't afford. Like, obviously, that's not cool, and we wouldn't do that. But let's assume they can afford it. They just can't get a loan from Fannie and Freddie or whatever, some big bank for whatever reason. And I've got tenants in my house right now that I'm going to sell them my house on an owner finance, and their credit score is not great, but they've been consistent on their payments. They've been communicative, and they've given me no reason to not trust them. And in the event that they don't pay me, then I can just take my house back, pretty much, and they would have lost everything they've put in the house so far. That being said, we can purchase a property subject to the existing mortgage, i.e. we're going to take the mortgage over and get the deed. And then what I'm going to do and go and resell the property to a new end buyer using something called a wrap around mortgage, or a new loan that wraps around the underlying loan. Here's an example. We have an underlying mortgage at $120,000 at a 5% rate. I go and sell to a new buyer with a wrap at $160,000 at 7.5%. So that doesn't include a down payment. So let's just say the new loan is at 160 at a 7.5. I would collect the spread of the difference in the principal and interest, which would be several $100s a month on that pure cash flow, without me having to go and worry about landlording and worrying about capital reserves and vacancies and dealing with leaky toilets and repairs and keeping the grass cut and the landscaping. I don't have to do any of that stuff, but I also don't own the house. So just a different strategy, but this is a way we can help and make money on it too. What this does to help the seller is it gets them out immediately from their foreclosure, and it brings the loan current. Whoopsies. And they can walk away without a foreclosure on their record, and maybe even with something in their pocket. So again, when we do this, the wraparound mortgage will be structured legally and righteously, and it's going to be done and closed by a real estate attorney. Not all states permit wraparounds, and they require proper documentation, and so there's going to be a promissory note and a deed of trust and a loan servicer in the middle, so that way everything is above board. This to me is a great strategy, and I know people making a lot of money doing this, a lot of money. And the only thing is, in 20, 30 years, whenever all these payments are done, like, they're not going to have any more cash flow. So that's really the one caveat to that. So this is it. So just to recap today, we talked about a few more strategies. The one is going to help depending on the situation. If somebody's in a temporary hardship, we can help them negotiate a forbearance agreement with their lender. That will help them, obviously. The next one is going to be a short sale. It's a little bit more involved. It's a little bit more complicated, but this is still an opportunity to make money. It's obviously an opportunity to help somebody, and it helps them, avoid the foreclosure, but it's a little bit lengthier of a process, but it's still possible, and it happens all the time. The seller, depending on the situation, if the note is not purchasable, a subject to situation won't work. There's not really things that we can do as investors to make this happen. Better than an auction, a foreclosure auction is a deed in lieu. They just deed the house back. But the lender, again, they just need to make sure that the title's clean and the property's in good condition. Or we can purchase the note, or refer to somebody who will purchase the note and make money either on a referral fee here, or if we can purchase the note, then we will make a lot of money on just the dynamics and the metrics and the numbers from that in and of itself, depending on the deal. And then the last one we can do is a wrap around mortgage, when we buy the house subject to, and then we sell it on an owner finance to somebody else, and the new loan wraps around the old loan, and we make the split on the difference. We get a down payment, and we go. And so it helps the seller, helps them get their credit built up, and it also helps a new buyer have a new house on terms in which they would not have been able to get a house with a regular lender. So it's kind of a win-win situation for everybody, and by us creatively finding a solution to a problem for more than one party here, we can make money on it and get paid for the value that we bring. So that is the deal with this, and we will talk about 3 more strategies next week that we can utilize, employ, and to help sellers that are in financial hardship, that will give them multiple ways out of avoiding a foreclosure, and allow us to be compensated for the value that we bring to them. All right, later, guys.